The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Big H Podcast. We have a special guest with us today. Comes to us all the way from Texas. And Dave Crumb, who I usually with on Conversations with Crumb, I'm going to put it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. I'm delighted today to introduce our special guest. As you know, yesterday we dedicated the historical marker for Walter Vaughn at Hilton Beach. And Walter, as you know, was a conductor on the Underground Railroad way back in 1850. And we have one of his descendants today with us. 5 of the descendants came for the dedication. They were Lonie Wilson, who will be our guest today, William Jones, Omar Wilson, Gloria Watts from Taunton, Mass., and her brother David Watts, all the way from Fairbanks, Alaska. So we have really had a wonderful time meeting these people, and they were very interested in being here for the dedication of Walter's historical marker down at the end of 259 at Hilton Beach. So now I'm going to introduce Lonie, but I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's all the way from Katy, Texas. And David Watts is a cousin?
Gloria's cousin.
Gloria's cousin, okay,
Yeah.
not a sister.
Well, he's our cousin. You said her brother.
Ah, her brother, okay. David Watts is only a cousin to Gloria, not a brother. So, with that, turned over to Lonie.
Hi, Mike and Dave. It's wonderful to be here with you today. And yesterday was a very exciting, wonderful day out at Hilton Beach and for the unveiling of the historical marker for our great-great-uncle Walter Vaughn. I currently live in Katy, Texas. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, grew up there, was educated there, and I moved to Texas about 1998, and I've been there ever since.
Good. And how did you feel about the event yesterday, Lonie? Was it what you expected? You've been here before, so it wasn't totally a surprise to be in Hilton, but just your reaction to things.
It was wonderful. Everything, the dedication, especially, to give honor to Walter and his accomplishments, and to not only just to Walter, but the entire city of Hilton and Parma, but just to acknowledge his participation in the Underground Railroad and risks that he took, and the entire community here. Everyone was just so welcoming, and all I can say was just wonderful. We just had a really good time in meeting everyone, and it's like fellowship,
Yes.
We all felt like during the day, just having conversations, learning about other people, and discussing Walter and the other Vaughn family members that lived here.
Mm-hmm.
It was just wonderful.
And you got to see Braddock Bay,
Yes.
where they first settled down
Yes.
there. That was
Yes.
kind of nice. We missed that the last time. Well, the weather was perfect too.
Oh, yes, it was.
We didn't know how it was going to turn out, but it was certainly a day to remember as far as the weather. The lake was like a mill pond, and sometime you should see the lake when it's angry, because it's whole nother picture up there. Tell us a little bit about your cousins that were here.
Okay. Well, we all descend from Walter's brother Ansel. He was our great grandfather,
Okay.
and at one time he lived in Hilton, Parma, and he left around 1858. So Gloria and David. Well, let me back up a little bit to Ansel. He married Lucy Ann McWhorter. So they had a daughter named Lucy Vaughn. So Lucy Vaughn is our great grandmother.
Okay.
So she had a daughter, Annie, and Annie married a Watts, and she had another daughter, my grandmother, and Marie Thomas, and she married a Kelly. So we're cousins.
I see.
From those two sisters.
And your grandmother, I remember you telling me, used to tell you about the Vaughns.
Yes.
And that's kind of what's planted the seed for your interest.
Yes.
In the genealogy of the family.
Yes. When I was growing up in Colorado, she used to pull out the family photos and just talk about her family and where they came from. And of course, back then, I was just a teenager, and I really wasn't interested in it. But I became more interested before she passed away in 1994, and I really started paying attention and taking notes.
So you had your grandmother until 1994?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So I made her a promise that I would not forget these people, because she wanted to go back to Illinois where they were living, and then she wanted to come here, but she was never able, to do that. So I promised her that I would do that, and I would not let the next generation or the generation after that forget about these people.
No, that's wonderful.
Yes,
and
our family.
And now the sign is there, so there's a what would you call that? A marker to remember things by.
Right. Yes.
The newer generations.
Yes, to know that they were here.
Yeah. Yes, and we haven't forgotten them here in Hilton either. For years, I first heard about the Vaughns when I was a youngster. I think I told you yesterday, the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Ferguson, her father bought all the lake frontage, I believe from probably Walter and Elijah. I haven't seen the proof of that, but he loved the lakefront and the land along there, and he gave her 40 acres. Some of the land went back south. And then for her wedding gift, he built a house there, which is still standing. But by the time I was a young kid, she was an old lady. She made good cookies. And I would go over there and rake the lawn or do some errands for her. And she was the first one that told me about the Vaughns. And I believe she probably knew Walter because she was born in 1875 and Walter died in 1898. So they were in the neighborhood. And she never told me she knew him, but she talked about it. So that's how I got aware of it. And then other people, as time went on, it was no big deal back then. It was just some of the local lore, if you will. And then I, of course, went off to college. I got a job. I got married. I didn't think about these things for probably another 40 years. And I came back to Hilton and began to delve into history. And then the interest in the Underground Railroad has never waned. All the young children love to hear about that. And Mike, I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I mean, the other day, I'm a third grade school teacher, and part of our curriculum, we were talking about a picture book, and it's called Aunt Clara and in the Freedom Quilt. And I read the picture book to my students, and it delved into the Underground Railroad. So I started to talk to my students about the Underground Railroad and a podcast I had done with him. So when you came up, I was like, kids, there's a descendant. So, I mean, one of my questions is what type of person was Walter? Like,
From the documents that I've uncovered and I've kind of put together, you can kind of look at some historical documents, what was going on, what he was doing at the time that he lived here. He was, his father passed away when they were young. So their mother raised them. And he cared an awful lot for his family, especially his mother and his sister, because his two other older brothers left the area. And then Ansel, he left the area as well. And then eventually Elijah, which was the youngest brother, he left the area. And Walter stayed behind and took care of his mother and his sister, Mary Ann, and they both um, they stayed here until they passed away. It appeared to me that he cared an awful lot about other people and especially the freedom seekers, and that seems to be a common theme among the Vaughn family is freedom and just the fact that he was here. He had his boathouse on the lake. He participated in the community. He was a fisherman. He sold his goods, to the local community. So he cared about other people and doing good with other people. I ran across some records. He was a member of the Baptist church. He actually got baptized into that Baptist church. I found some records where he got baptized. So he was a religious man. And some of the stories is that I've heard, the local stories, is how he would take people from the north to the church. How he would come with a load of people to the church. So that just shows, that's just another part of his character in terms of how he cared about other people. And it seems like he had a pretty good relationship with a lot of people here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he pops up in diaries. Walter Bond. I can't think of any right now, but when I have time this winter, I'm going to go into those diaries and see if we can't fish out those remembrance, and I'll email them to you. But they're little tidbits that kind of substantiate what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That little poem that they read yesterday, or that I read from Mary Stevens, was about Walter bringing a load up from the north. The north meaning down on 259, north of Bartlett's Corners, all the way up to Hilton, in a wagon. He would bring a load of people that wanted to go to church. They go to the Baptist church. I'm not sure whether the Free Will or the First Baptist. I think it was the First Baptist, but I can't say for sure. There were two Baptist churches in town in those days. But from what I've heard, I think Walter was a very humble man. He was religious. He was good to his neighbors. They were good to him. He was definitely a major part of the community. And Ira Cross, who lived up on top of the hill at Bartlett's Corners, was his neighbor and good friend. And ultimately his executor when he passed away in 1898. And we do have a copy of his obituary, which tells quite a little bit. You have a copy
Yeah,
of
I
that.
have a copy of that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So explain a little bit more about some of the documents that you've been getting information about him. I mean, you mentioned diaries. Are there other things that you were able to find out about him?
His will. I have a copy of his will, and then there's stories that my grandmother told because she lived with her father Ansel Von, which was Walter's brother, lived with my grandmother and her mother and father, and she would tell stories of how he would write to his family members, and so she has letters that he would write to his brother Ansel, and then his brother William, who was in Michigan. And so I have that information, and then I already mentioned his will and some of his deeds to his property. And also, he's mentioned in some of his brothers, like his brother William, his pension file. William was fought in the Civil War.
Okay.
And I obtained his military pension file, and he mentions his brother. They did depositions when he had to get his pension, and then his wife did depositions after he passed away to continue to get his the widow pension. So those are some of the documents that I have in just researching the family.
yeah, interesting. Would you comment on Ansel's ability to find farmland that was the most productive?
Yeah.
To me, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So when Ansel left, he went to a little place called Hadley Township, Illinois, and he married in 1858. He married Lucy Ann McWhorter, and Lucy Ann, she was a daughter of Free Frank and Free Lucy McWhorter. And Free Frank, the town where they were living, her father founded this town in 1836. So when Frank died in 1854, so Ansel was there. I'm not really for sure when he showed up, but we know for sure he was there in 1858 because of his marriage license. So the town was prospering. There was a lot of new settlers coming into the town, and Ansel shows up on, they were purchasing and selling the land. He shows up on a lot of those deed records. Um, there was an archaeology dig of the town back in 2007, I believe, around there. So, and from talking to the archaeologists, and they got all the deed documents together. That's how I know that his name shows up. And what they were piecing together were the people that were the first settlers there, who was buying the land, who was selling the land. So some of the richest farmland in that county, in that area, Ansel's name is on many of those documents.
Okay.
From purchasing the land from the bank, and there were other people that owned the land, and then it would be sold to other settlers when they were coming in. So, and then there's a story of when the family left from Illinois and they went to Oklahoma. Well, the first land that they purchased it wasn't very good land. They couldn't really do farming on it because we come from a family of farmers. So Ansel wasn't involved in that land purchase at all. So then they had to go back and get him and bring him to Oklahoma so he could review the land and find a good piece of land that they could actually farm. So he was always referred to as the landman. You know, the man that you go to help you select a good piece of land for farming.
He worked for Chauncey Curtis too here in
Yes,
Parma.
he did.
He shows up on the census of 1855, I believe, or maybe 1850, working for Chauncey Curtis, who was a neighbor. That's on Curtis Road. And we don't know this as a fact, but I'm sure in that as a young man, he learned a lot of agricultural wisdom from Chauncey Curtis, who was a successful farmer here in Parma, and probably other farmers too around. But our lake land along here is very fertile, and some of it was once swamp, and it got drained, and it was just soil that had never been used before, and it really produced. And so that's something we're kind of proud of. But Ansel had a hand in that way back when, that was down on Curtis Road, the house across from Joya's.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was very young. He was in his 20s at that time. So I'm pretty sure that experience really helped him. And I'm pretty sure he was involved with his brother, Walter.
I think they were all very bright. In one of the articles by Ira Cross, it said that Elijah Bond was one of the brightest students in the school district here. Of course, he probably didn't get through 8th or 9th grade, but he could do all kinds of math and algebra and even trigonometry. I guess he was quite a student. So I assume that all the boys are probably pretty bright, and Ansel and Walter and so forth. And this comes from Ira Cross. I mean, he knew him, so that was interesting to know. Any other thoughts, Mike?
Just when you were talking in the beginning, can you explain a little bit more about the Freedom Seekers, what that group was all about, and what they did?
Well, what a lot of people refer to them as fugitive slaves or runaway slaves, and I prefer to refer to them as freedom seekers because that's what they were doing. They were seeking freedom. So Walter's participation in that when they were escaping or seeking freedom from the South, their slave masters, and there were some people that were in the North as well that had slaves, and him wanting to make sure that he could do whatever he could in helping the freedom seekers get to freedom, and that's something that I believe that all of the Bond boys were involved in that. William in Grand Rapids, Ansel in Illinois, in New Philadelphia, because the town that he lived in, there was abolitionist involvement there as well. And I don't have any documented proof, but I'm pretty sure that Ansel coming from here and his brother being a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and Ansel going to a town in Illinois, 20 miles from Missouri, which was a slave state.
Yeah.
And that the people in that town in New Philadelphia, they were also helping people come north, to seeking freedom. So I'm pretty sure that there were connections there,
Right.
that they all knew and worked together on the Underground Railroad. Because I know Frank's sons, he was involved in that.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about Free Frank? Because he's a great-grandfather, a great-great-grandfather.
Yes.
He's interesting. You told me about it, but I think Mike would be really interested.
Okay, Free Frank, he was born a slave in South Carolina, I believe around 1799. And he, as a young man, he was sent to Kentucky by his enslaver to clear some land and set up a farm for his enslaver. His mother was a West African woman, and it's assumed, not proven or documented, that his enslaver, George McWhorter, was his father. So Frank was able to hire himself out and save money. He established, right before the War of 1812, he established a saltpeter mine, and he was mining saltpeter. So when the War of 1812 broke out, he was able to sell the saltpeter and make quite a bit of money. So in 1817, he purchased his wife Lucy's freedom. And then in 1819, he purchased his home. And that's when he decided to leave and move to Illinois. So he had a friend, a doctor that had been to Illinois and was doing some land speculation. So he found this piece of land. So in 1830, the family left. But before they could leave, and his oldest son, Frank Jr., had escaped to Canada. So he had to trade his saltpeter mine for the freedom of his son.
Okay.
Because he needed his son. He had two other sons, but they were younger. So in 1830, they moved to Illinois. In 1836, he started, before, when they first arrived, it was just a wilderness. So, of course, they had to clear the land and build a house. And then he started purchasing other land. And he started selling those lots to anyone who wanted to purchase them. And the whole purpose of that was to purchase the rest of his family that was still enslaved. So he was able to purchase about 15 family members, his children, some of his grandchildren.
Now, were they still with Mr. McWhorter?
Well, no, his family was with his wife. His wife, Lucy, was enslaved as well, and she was with a different family, the Denham family. So most of his children were with the Denham family. One of his sons, though, Solomon McWhorter, he had been, before Frank could purchase him, he had been sold to another enslaver.
Wow.
So, but he was able to purchase his children, all of his children that were enslaved. He didn't see all of his family purchased before he died, because he died in 1854. But in his will, he made it clear that his land was to be sold and to purchase the rest of his family, which the family was able to do that.
Nice.
So the town now is, it just became a part of the National Park Services,
Okay.
the 424th park, the end of December last year.
And that's in New Philadelphia?
New Philadelphia, and it's in Illinois, Pike County, Illinois.
And he was the first African American to found a
Yes,
town
he
in the
was.
United States.
Yes, he was the first African American to legally plat and found a town prior to the Civil War.
Wow. Interesting. Now, did you learn all this through your grandmother, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She really had a lot of good information. Of course, she was right there.
Yes.
And she never knew Free Frank, though, did she? Was she born later?
No, she didn't know him. She was born in 1900, but she was born not in New Philadelphia, but she was born in the county, Pike County, in another little town called Griggsville, about 15 miles away.
Interesting. Well, when you speak of the 1850s, that's when John Brown was out and about, bleeding Kansas and the slave states, and it was a very tense time in the United States. It was leading up to the Civil War.
Yeah.
And John Brown did Harper's Ferry, and Garrett Smith down in Peterborough was his big benefactor. And I've been reading books on all that, so I'm getting, a little edge on that whole business, and it's fascinating what was going on. Exactly.
We're speaking with Lonie Wilson. You said, I was talking to you in the hallway, and genealogy has been a big part of your life for the past, 20 plus years. Speak to our listeners about how you got into it and just how it has flourished and made your life awesome.
Okay. Well, of course, I had all this information from my grandmother. I had some names, some places, and that was pretty much, maybe a time period, here and there. So I just wanted to, because I made that promise, I needed to find out more. And so the first thing I did was, I lived in Houston, so we have a really great research library there. So I spent a lot of time, at the library and talking to the librarians and, going through the microfilm. They would direct me to, where I can find information, reading a lot of books, looking for names in that county, really just educating myself as to how to find the information, and just really just digging in there and looking just at all different sources of information, making a list. First, I had to start with a lot of people, they begin with their self and go backwards, but I did it differently. I went as far back as I could, the furthest ancestor that I could, and I researched that person and census records and any documents that I could actually find, reading books about the area that they came from, educating myself as to the schools, the churches that they may have attended, and just really laying all that out and seeing, putting together the parents and the grandparents, whoever I could find in the house, and just moving to coming forward. And it was easy when I got coming forward because I knew pretty much, my family, my grandma, my aunts and uncles and, great grandmothers and that. But it has really given me a better understanding as to who I am and where I came from, the people that I come from, the sacrifices that they made, so I could be here. There was a lot of challenges. And I mentioned before, that how the freedom was always there, was always their purpose. Freedom for themselves, freedom for their children. And as African Americans, land was freedom.
Yes.
So they owned their own land, they farmed, um, they were citizens, in their communities. So that's one of the things that has really helped me in learning about doing genealogy and learning about, your family and just putting all those pieces together. Sometimes it doesn't happen right away, and that's really one of the ways that I connected with Dave is I was researching my Vaughn family and I knew that they were here, but I needed more information, because I was just getting information that I could get online or at the library. But the one thing that I learned in doing genealogy, you have to go to the location. You have to go where they were and dig into those records and talk to people and try to find whatever information you can on your family. Like there was no way I would have found Walter's will on the internet.
Right. Yeah.
They're doing great, making great progress now, like Ancestry and Family Search. And I do use those, but you still have to, you have to have, you have to have a plan and know what you're looking for and know how to put all those pieces, together. So it takes some time and you have to educate yourself. And that was one of the things I did. I went to a lot of seminars, participated in webinars, and hung out at the library and talked to other people. You just have to really, you just have to educate yourself.
Persevere.
Yes.
And fortunately, that's why historical societies and historian offices are valuable for people like Lonie.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the way from Texas. But she hit it right when she hit this office because we had information. And it made this office even more interesting because we got information. So now we've got a sign. So it all works.
Yeah.
An interesting story in one of the books is, and we read it yesterday, it was about John Vaughn coming back from Michigan to visit the family. And this is kind of a human interest story. John was a noted wrestler, and he came back from Michigan to visit. And there was a Civil War veteran that had just come home that was over in Hamlin, Sandy Creek. He was supposedly good. I think it was more like boxing or something. But anyway, the local folks in Hilton arranged a bout, and they got John and this person together, and they built a platform on Hubby Street, which was the village square, 16 feet square and 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And they had a match, and this was probably in 1866, right here in the middle of Hilton. And this Ira Cross, of course, he's the one that wrote the story. He said, yes, and I was there, and Jack Vaughn laid him on his back 2 times out of 3 and won the purse of gold of $40. But then the people in Hilton, it was Unionville back then, passed a hat and raised $5 for the loser, which was really a nice, he didn't go home feeling bad, but he lost his reputation. So just a good human interest story.
Yeah. I've learned a lot. And Lonie, is there anything else you want to add that we didn't touch on today about Walter or anybody else?
Yeah, one of the things that I did want to talk about is one of the purposes that, I do this genealogy. Another purpose, it's not only for myself, but when I started, I just had stories from my grandmother and some notes that I had taken. And I think it's important to leave the next generation because I put in 20 plus years of work. And now that I've done that work, then I can leave that for the next generation and the generation after that. It all goes back to that promise I made my grandmother that I'll never forget these families. And it's important to tell their stories because they were some pretty fascinating people. They had challenges, but they overcame, those challenges and they made a life for themselves. And it's just important that they know that. So we started, my cousin Gloria, she's a part of it, Gloria Watts and David, and then my younger son, Omar. And there's some other descendants, my daughter and granddaughter, a couple of other cousins. We formed a nonprofit. And what we're trying to do with that is, well, what we are doing, we're not trying, we brought in, it's like an intergenerational. So we're sharing the history with the next generation.
Awesome.
And they will share it with the next generation, and it should go on and on and on. So with that nonprofit, the first project that we did was there's a cemetery, the African American cemetery in New Philadelphia, and it's where Free Frank, his wife, and 7 of his children are buried. Ansel may be buried there, but we haven't found his a grave for him yet. But we recently restored some of the headstones that were visible in the cemetery. So our next project is to do some type of remote sensing and maybe have to do a little ground truthing to try to uncover, because we know there's other people buried there, but they were all African American from the town and the local, that general area. It was called Hadley Township. So we just want to honor those family members.
Sure.
So that was our first project, and we're going to continue with that. And I'm not for sure what we're going to take on next.
Well, that sounds like a great endeavor, and it's great for the younger generation
Yes.
to see your leadership in doing that, and Gloria's.
Yes.
One other thing that just crossed my mind is both you and Gloria talked about other members of the Vaughn family that are in the United States now and what they're doing. And I thought that was quite interesting, all the different professions that you mentioned. If you could comment on that.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote that down here in my notes. Yesterday I had it right off the top of my head, but today. Okay, so yeah, some of the career fields that they've gone into is education. We have a lot of teachers, and that goes down to about 3 or 4 or 5 generations. It actually started with Lucy Vaughn, who was Ansel's wife. No, his daughter. I'm sorry, his daughter. She was the first school teacher, and it just trickled down in our family to where we've had a lot of our our family go into teaching. We have a lot of nurses. We have one of my cousins. She's second cousin. She just graduated from college. She's a doctor, and she's doing her residency in North Carolina. We have many entrepreneurs, and I think that's probably the largest group right there, especially the younger generation. Not my generation, but the generation under me and that next generation. They pretty much have gone into their own businesses of some type. You know, we're in Colorado, Arizona, Oklahoma, California. We're just
everywhere.
yeah.
Nobody back in New York, though, are they?
Yeah. They're Gloria's in Massachusetts.
What was Gloria's profession? I remember her telling about it. It was quite interesting.
She worked for the IRS.
Okay.
She I'm not for sure exactly. I know when they were developing the Braille for, she taught the agents, IRS agents. And I know she was involved with the development of the Braille for them to, when they were working with clients and they had to know, everyone's not the same. So they needed agents that could read, Braille. So she worked on that. I know that was one thing that she did. And she went around all over the country. She traveled, training and teaching, IRS agents.
Interesting. And David in Fairbanks, Alaska, told me that he was in the construction business as an entrepreneur, I guess. And when he went by a cobblestone house, he was extremely interested in that. We stopped and he was looking at how the cobblestones were laid. And I think he needs to come back sometime and travel up the Ridge Road. Yeah. Well, that's all fascinating.
Yeah, I just think, that that as a genealogist, my passion, for uncovering the past, and just that thrill of discovering, is really what drives me, to do that. Just to learn about as much as I possibly can. And when you do that, you don't just learn about your family, you learn about a community, and what people were doing in the community, how they got along, who their friends were, and it's that really, just really drives me. And for me, I think that history really isn't the past. It's the story we tell about that past. For me, that's how I feel about it.
And the thrill of discovery.
Yes.
When you find, and the one thing that both Lonie and I are looking for is more about Nirobon. He's the enigma. We don't know exactly where he came from. Well, we know he's from Vermont, but there are no bonds there that we can connect with, no place name. But that's the brick wall we're trying to get through. And so he's our first African American settler in Hilton that's on record. And Mary, his wife, I believe, came from Canada, but we're not sure just where. So those are question marks that hopefully we'll be able to find in the future.
Well, very, very good. Lonie, anything else?
No, I just think that yesterday was just so wonderful, and I'm so excited and so happy to finally see that marker, go up. I know Dave worked on that for a very long time, and I'm so appreciative and thankful. And the community was just wonderful. I mean, I feel like I know everyone.
You're an honorary citizen now.
Yeah, I just feel like, I know everyone, and it was just great.
Well, thank you, Lonnie, and we pride ourselves in this community as being a welcoming community. It's not that big. We've got a long memory here. Mike's mother and father were in school with me. There's still lots of connectivity, and a lot of communities don't have that anymore. Too much change and too many. I think everybody thirsts for that, but we've still got it here, and we're glad that we do.
Yes, yes.
And we're glad we connected with you and your family. Well, thank you so much for doing this and sharing
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yes, this has been Mike Hayes on the Big H podcast with our guest Lonie Wilson, celebrating Walter Vaughn's historical marker on Hilton Beach at the end of 259, and Dave Crumb, who had a big part in that. And I think I'm coming away with you're establishing a legacy for your family and just such a good foundation. And it all originated from that promise that you made. And I just hope that all of us have that connection with some older relative and make that same promise and follow up.
I think that's a good message for the students that might listen to this podcast. We all like to pass something on, and hopefully that the people that listen to this, especially young people, will be inspired to ask their grandparents a little bit about what the past was all about in their lives.
Yeah, ask them. I mean, I have grandchildren, young grandchildren, and I talk to them all the time. I have photos, and I explain to them who, just like my grandmother did to me, I do that with my grandchildren. I don't really expect, them to, try to remember anything right now today, but
it's an investment.
Yes.
They will remember 20, 30 years from now. I've got a 9-year-old grandson, and he loves history, and he now knows all the presidents. He can recite them. And we're working on family things, and hopefully he'll carry it on. Yeah. Well, thanks, Lonnie.
Okay,
thanks,
thank
Mike.
you.
Thank you so much, and have a safe trip back to Texas.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Good day.
And Dave.
The Big H podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll